Sheriff Jessica McCall had always been a respected figure in the small town of Green River, Texas. With a sharp mind, unyielding courage, and a sense of justice that ran deep, she was the pillar of the community, the one people turned to in their darkest hours. But on that cold winter morning, she would be the center of a tragedy that would shake Green River to its core. It was just after dawn when Jessica came home from a long night shift. The icy wind howled outside, and the world was still, blanketed in a thick fog. Her patrol car slid slowly onto the gravel driveway of the small farmhouse she shared with her husband, Kyle McCall, and their 15-year-old daughter, Emily. Jessica's boots crunched on the gravel as she stepped out of the car. She'd expected the house to be quiet. She had hoped to grab a few hours of sleep before the next shift. But when she opened the front door, she immediately knew something was wrong. The house was eerily silent. No sound of the TV, no distant hum of the refrigerator, no noise at all. She stepped further inside, her boots leaving footprints on the wooden floor. Her heart began to race, her instincts telling her something was off. Kyle was supposed to be out with the horses. Emily, as far as she knew, was supposed to be upstairs in her room, finishing up her homework. But when she passed the living room and glanced toward the kitchen, she froze. There in the dim light was Kyle sitting at the kitchen table, his shirt untucked, his face flushed. And sitting across from him was Emily. The sight of them together, so close, too close, shattered her mind. Jessica had seen her husband and daughter in this room 1,000 times before, but now it was different. The atmosphere felt thick with tension, an unspoken heaviness in the air. Kyle's hand was placed on Emily's arm, his fingers brushing against her skin in a way that made Jessica's stomach twist. Time seemed to freeze as she stood there, gripping the doorframe, unable to process what she was seeing. But before she could take a step forward, Emily suddenly pulled away from her father's touch and stood up. The quick, jerky motion made Jessica's heart skip. Emily's face was pale, her eyes wide, her lips trembling. Kyle, on the other hand, looked like a man who had just been caught doing something unforgivable. In that moment, the world seemed to tilt. "Jess," Kyle stammered, his voice shaky as he stood. I can explain." But Jessica didn't want to hear it. Her blood ran cold as the reality of what she had seen crashed into her. Her own daughter sitting so close to her husband, their body language too familiar, too intimate. Her brain screamed at her to run, to leave, to get away from this nightmare. "Explain?" Jessica's voice was icy. "Explain what?" The words felt like poison in her mouth, and she could barely speak. Her hands trembled, her mind racing through a storm of disbelief, betrayal, and anger. Kyle stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. But before he could say anything more, Jessica took a deep breath and did something she never thought she would do. She reached for the gun in her holster. Her fingers closed around the cold metal of her service weapon as she aimed it at her husband. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and sweat as she pulled the trigger. The first shot echoed through the room, and Kyle staggered back, a look of shock on his face. The second shot followed quickly, then another, and another. In a blur, she fired 20 times, each shot more desperate than the last, each one a scream for justice, for something that made sense in this world turned upside down. By the time the gun clicked empty, Kyle McCall was dead. Jessica stood there, breathing heavily, her eyes wide as she looked down at the lifeless body of the man she had once loved. She couldn't understand what had just happened, how her world had shattered in an instant. But there was one thing she knew for sure. Her husband was gone, and whatever was left of her family, whatever had remained between her and Kyle, was destroyed. As the weight of what she'd done began to sink in, she knew one thing. She needed to cover her tracks. The wind outside howled as if the earth itself mourned the loss that had occurred inside that small farmhouse. Jessica stood frozen, staring at the body of her husband. Kyle McCall, once the man she had trusted with everything, her love, her life, her family, was lying on the kitchen floor, blood pooling around him. The room smelled like gunpowder and death, a chilling reminder that in that moment she had taken a life. Her hands were still trembling, and for the first time in years she felt vulnerable, trapped in a world of her own making. Her heart pounded in her chest, and her mind was running in circles. The realization of what she had done didn't hit her fully yet, but she knew the consequences would be severe. There was no going back. She had killed Kyle. But why? Why had she done it? The betrayal, the violation. She had found them together in a way that no parent ever should. She didn't know what to believe, but in that moment, the lines of morality had blurred, and everything she had once believed in, justice, duty, and family, felt like it had shattered beyond repair. Her breath caught in her throat. Emily, her daughter, had been in that room. She had seen it all. The pain in Emily's eyes, the hesitation in her movements, the distance between them now, it made Jessica sick to her stomach. But as the realization sank in, she knew one thing. She had to protect her daughter. In a daze, Jessica reached for her phone. She knew she couldn't call her fellow officers. They would never believe her, not after what had happened. She needed to cover her tracks, to make sure the truth never got out. She had the power to shape this narrative, to make it seem like something else entirely. Her hands shaking, she dialed the number of her oldest friend, Mark Dawson, who worked as a private investigator. Mark had been there for her during some of the darkest times in her life, and right now she needed his help more than anything. He was a seasoned investigator, a man who knew how to handle situations just like this. Mark, Jessica's voice was low, almost a whisper, but sharp with panic. I need you to come to the house. It's, it's bad. What happened, Jess? Mark's voice was filled with concern. I can't explain over the phone. Just come, please. Now I need you here. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Mark didn't ask questions. He knew Jessica well enough to know that when she called, it was serious. I'm on my way. Don't do anything until I get there, Mark said. Jessica hung up the phone and stared down at her husband's body again. She needed to act fast. There was no time to waste. She couldn't let anyone know what had really happened. Mark would help her. He would find a way to cover up this mess. Minutes later, she heard the sound of tires crunching on the gravel outside. Mark had arrived. The front door creaked open, and Mark stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room. His face was hard, professional, and his presence was calming amidst the chaos. He didn't need to ask any questions. He could see it all. You know what to do, Jess, he said quietly, his voice steady. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. Jessica nodded, feeling a pang of guilt. She hadn't wanted to drag Mark into this, but she had no other choice. He was the only one who could help her now. Mark walked over to Kyle's body, his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. The shots were close range, he muttered under his breath. 20 shots. That's personal. Jessica's stomach twisted, but she held her ground. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, she whispered. He was doing something awful. With Emily. I caught them together. I couldn't let it go on. Mark gave her a long, steady look, his eyes softening slightly. I get it, but you know what's at stake here, don't you? Jessica felt a knot form in her throat. I know. I can't let anyone find out what I saw. You have to help me cover this up, Mark. For Emily. For the sake of my family. Mark sighed, walking over to the kitchen counter and picking up the phone. I'll make a call. You just need to stay calm. Let me handle it. In the following hours, Mark worked with cold efficiency, arranging the scene to look as though Kyle had been shot in a botched robbery. He wiped down everything, making sure there was no trace of Jessica's involvement. He even set up the gun in a way that suggested Kyle had grabbed it in self-defense. He knew how to make it look convincing. He had done this before, covering up crimes, manipulating evidence, and making sure the guilty walked free. As Jessica watched Mark work, she felt her heart grow heavier. She had always prided herself on being a sheriff, on upholding the law and serving justice. But now she had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The truth didn't matter anymore. She had to protect Emily, no matter the cost. When the sheriff's department arrived, it was too late to turn back. They were quick to assess the scene, and within minutes, it was clear that the shooting was not as simple as it appeared. The officers noticed the details: the position of the body, the lack of forced entry, the odd way the gun had been left on the counter. Detective Laura Collins, a seasoned investigator with over 20 years of experience, stepped into the house. Her sharp eyes immediately picked up on inconsistencies in the scene. She knew the signs. A robbery gone wrong didn't add up when there were no signs of struggle, and a sheriff who shot her husband 20 times in cold blood? That wasn't a robbery. It was something much darker. As the investigation unfolded, the small town of Green River began to buzz with rumors. People talked in hushed voices, wondering what had really happened behind the closed doors of the McCall farmhouse. They didn't know the truth, but Detective Collins was determined to find it, and she was about to uncover something much deeper than anyone could have ever imagined. Detective Collins began her investigation the next day, carefully reviewing the evidence and speaking with witnesses. She quickly realized that something wasn't right. There were too many questions, too many pieces that didn't fit. Why had Jessica killed Kyle? Was it truly just an act of betrayal? Or was there something more sinister at play? The answers wouldn't come easily, but Detective Collins was relentless. She was about to peel back the layers of a family's darkest secrets. Detective Laura Collins had seen her fair share of tragedies. In her 2 decades of experience as an investigator, she had handled cases of murder, betrayal, and crime of all kinds. Yet something about the McCall case was different. There was an unease that gnawed at her as she walked through the McCall house, a chill in the air that didn't feel like the cold, winter wind outside. The McCall family had been well respected in Green River. Sheriff Jessica McCall was the town's lawkeeper, a fixture of the community, admired by everyone. Kyle McCall, her husband, was a quiet man who worked with horses, a pillar of the farming community. And Emily, their teenage daughter, was known for being studious, kind, and polite. To the people in town, the McCalls were the model family, but beneath the surface there was a darkness that was just beginning to emerge. Laura had spent the past several hours examining the crime scene. She had noted the odd position of Kyle's body, sitting slumped forward in a pool of blood, his face contorted in surprise, as if he hadn't seen the blow coming. The body was covered with 20 distinct gunshot wounds, each one of them from close range. A sign of fury, a sign of something more personal than a simple killing in self-defense. Then there was the gun itself, a service weapon, registered under Jessica McCall's name. Laura's stomach churned at the realization. It wasn't just any murder, it was a sheriff's crime. Jessica McCall had killed her own husband. There was something unsettling about the way the scene had been staged. The gun had been placed back on the counter in an almost deliberate way. The evidence didn't add up. A robbery gone wrong didn't make sense when there were no signs of forced entry. Laura knew the McCall house well. She had been there on several occasions for community events. The front door was sturdy and the locks were new. There was no way a thief had come in and shot Kyle. But then, why would Jessica do it? Laura had interviewed the sheriff briefly earlier, but Jessica's demeanor had been detached, almost too calm for a woman who had just killed her husband. There was a coldness in her eyes and something that set off alarms in Laura's mind. She was hiding something. That much was clear. As Laura thought about the case, she began to run through the known facts. Jessica had been the one to find Kyle's body. She was the one who had called for help. She had been the one who insisted it was a robbery gone wrong. But Laura knew better. Before she could continue her line of thought, Laura's phone buzzed with a text. It was from one of the officers who had processed the crime scene. The message was simple but damning. "We found the daughter's fingerprints on the gun." Laura felt the hair on the back of her neck rise. Emily, the McCall's daughter, had been in the house at the time of the shooting. But why would her fingerprints be on the gun? Everything was starting to connect, but the dots were tangled. If Emily had handled the gun, that meant she had been involved in some way. Was she a witness? Or had she been forced into something? There were so many unanswered questions. The detective decided it was time to bring Emily in for questioning. The next day, Emily McCall sat in the interrogation room, looking fragile and pale, her eyes swollen as if she hadn't slept in days. Laura had asked the officers to keep her comfortable, but she could see the signs of trauma. There was a deep unease in Emily's posture, a tension in the way she sat. "Emily, I know this is difficult, but I need you to tell me what happened," Laura said softly, her voice calm, almost motherly. "Your mother told us what happened, but I need to hear it from you." Emily's eyes flickered nervously toward the door, as if hoping someone would come to her rescue. But Laura wasn't going to let her go until she got the truth. I, I don't know what happened, Emily said in a soft, broken voice. She wiped her eyes and took a shaky breath. I was just in my room, doing homework. Then I heard yelling. I went downstairs and I saw. She trailed off, her words faltering. Laura leaned forward, encouraging her with a gentle nod. Emily, it's okay. You can tell me. I know this is hard, but I need you to help me understand. The teenager swallowed hard and finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I saw them, Mom and Dad. They were, they were arguing. Emily's voice cracked, and she looked away, as if afraid to meet Laura's gaze. I didn't mean to overhear, but I did. And I saw them fight. Laura's heart sank. This was a crucial piece of information. What were they fighting about? Emily hesitated, her fingers gripping the edge of the table, the knuckles turning white. I don't know exactly, but it was bad. Mom was upset. She was really upset. She was crying, and then Dad was yelling. I don't know what he said. I just saw him, grab her, and she pushed him away. Laura's instincts told her this was only part of the story. Emily was holding back. She was scared, but she was also protecting someone, likely her mother. The teen's discomfort wasn't just from being in an interrogation room. There was something she wasn't saying, something she was keeping inside. Emily, I know this is hard, but we found your fingerprints on the gun, Laura said gently, watching Emily closely for any sign of reaction. The teen flinched, her face blanching, but she didn't say anything. Emily's silence only deepened the suspicion in Laura's mind. Why was she silent about the gun? What role had she played in the shooting? I didn't mean to touch it, Emily finally whispered, her voice trembling. I don't know how my prints got on it. Tell me the truth, Emily. Were you with your mother when it happened? Did you see her shoot your father? Laura's voice was firm now, her patience wearing thin. She needed answers. I was just scared, Emily mumbled, her hands wringing in her lap. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. Mom, she was angry. She couldn't stop. It was clear to Laura now, Emily was hiding something, but she wasn't ready to say what. The teen was in shock, her mind still processing the horror of what had occurred. Just then, the door to the interrogation room opened. Laura's partner, Detective Sam Harris, entered, holding a folder in his hands. He gave Laura a quick, questioning glance, then turned his attention to Emily. We've got some new evidence, Laura, he said quietly, sliding the folder across the table. It looks like Jessica McCall had been having an affair, a secret one, and the man she was involved with? He's a local, someone who's been in and out of the town recently. His name's Adam Collins. Laura's eyes narrowed as she processed the information. An affair. That explained the anger, the tension between Jessica and Kyle, but it didn't explain the murder. Not yet. She looked back at Emily, who was now avoiding her gaze. The teen was clearly in pain, but she was also complicit in something. Jessica's dark secret was beginning to unravel, and Emily knew more than she was saying. Emily, Laura said softly, her tone now sympathetic but firm, I need you to tell me the truth. What happened that night? Was your mom alone when it happened, or was someone else involved? Emily looked up at Laura, her eyes filled with fear. She didn't want to betray her mother, but the truth was pushing to the surface. Slowly, reluctantly, she spoke. I think Mom didn't just do it alone, she whispered. There was someone else there. Laura's heart raced as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. This case was darker than anyone had imagined, and the investigation was only just beginning. Detective Laura Collins sat back in her chair, stunned by the words that had just come from Emily McCall's trembling lips. There was someone else there. The room fell into a heavy silence, the weight of the teenager's admission hanging like a storm. Cloud threatening to break. Laura's mind raced, her thoughts tumbling over each other. Emily had been trying to protect her mother. That much was clear, but now she had revealed a detail that made everything more complicated. Someone else was there. Who could it be? Had Jessica McCall had an accomplice? Was Emily involved? Or was there another hidden truth lurking beneath the surface? Laura's heart pounded in her chest as she leaned forward, her voice calm but edged with urgency. Emily, who was there? Who else was with your mother when your father was killed? The teen recoiled slightly, her eyes darting around the room as if looking for a way out. She was scared, terrified even. The detective could see the internal struggle in Emily's face, the overwhelming sense of guilt and fear. But there was no turning back now. I, I don't know if I should say, Emily whispered, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Mom, Mom didn't want anyone to know. She told me to keep quiet. Laura felt a surge of frustration but tempered it with patience. I know you're scared, Emily, but keeping quiet won't help anyone. I need you to be honest with me. Who was there? The teenager looked down, her breath shaky. After a long pause, she finally spoke in a voice barely audible. It was Adam Collins. He's the one Mom's been seeing. Laura's eyes widened. The name rang a bell. Adam Collins. He was the same man who had been mentioned in the recent evidence. Someone Jessica had been having an affair with. Laura's instincts told her this wasn't just a simple affair. There was something darker at play here, and Adam Collins was connected to it. Adam Collins, Laura repeated, her mind connecting the dots. What happened when he was there, Emily? Did he hurt your father? Emily shook her head slowly, her eyes brimming with tears. Number. He didn't hurt Dad. But he was there when it all happened. I don't know what Mom and Adam were talking about, but it was bad. I heard them shouting. I think they were arguing about Dad finding out about the affair. Laura could feel the tension in Emily's voice, the hesitation. This was no longer just a murder investigation. It was becoming a tangled web of secrets, betrayal, and perhaps even revenge. Adam Collins was an accomplice. But what role had he played in Kyle's death? Was he merely a bystander, or had he actively participated in the crime? Emily, Laura pressed gently, what exactly did you see when you came downstairs that night? What did your mother and Adam do? The teenager swallowed hard and wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I saw them both. Mom was holding the gun, and she was shaking. She was crying too, and Adam was just standing there. He wasn't stopping her. He wasn't telling her not to do it. Emily's voice cracked. I didn't know what to do. I just froze. The details were coming together, but they only raised more questions. Jessica McCall had been distraught. Emily had seen her mother with the gun. But Adam Collins had been there too, doing nothing to stop it. Had he encouraged Jessica to kill her husband? Or was he simply a passive bystander, watching the events unfold without intervening? Laura sat in silence, letting Emily's words settle in. The truth was slowly beginning to take shape, but it was far from clear. That evening, Laura drove to the outskirts of Green River to find Adam Collins. She couldn't shake the nagging feeling that he was at the center of this web. If Jessica and Adam had been involved in the murder together, there was no telling what kind of motives or manipulations had been at play. Adam Collins lived in a small, modest house on the edge of town. As Laura pulled up to the driveway, she noticed his pickup truck parked outside, a sign that he was home. She stepped out of her car and approached the front door with caution. The small house looked quiet, unassuming, a far cry from the storm of emotions and secrets that had likely unfolded within its walls. She knocked firmly, her boots echoing on the wooden steps. A few moments passed before the door creaked open, revealing Adam. He was a tall man in his mid-30s with rough hands and a weary look in his eyes. His hair was unkempt, and his stubble added to his disheveled appearance. Laura's eyes narrowed as she sized him up. She knew that beneath his exterior, there was more than met the eye. This man had been involved in something much darker than a simple affair. Adam Collins? She asked, her voice firm but professional. Adam glanced at her, his eyes darting nervously. He seemed to recognize her immediately, and his posture stiffened. Yeah, that's me. What do you want? I'm Detective Laura Collins. I'm investigating the death of Kyle McCall, she said, studying him closely. I need to ask you a few questions. Adam's eyes flickered with fear, but he quickly masked it with a forced grin. I've already talked to the cops. There's nothing I can add. I think there is, Laura replied, stepping forward. You were at the McCall house the night Kyle died. You're involved in this case, whether you like it or not. We need to talk. For a moment, Adam remained silent, his face a mask of defiance. But then he sighed, running a hand through his hair. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, he muttered, his voice breaking. It was supposed to be simple, but she got too far. She didn't listen to me. Laura's curiosity piqued. What do you mean? What didn't she listen to? Adam hesitated for a long moment before he finally spoke. Jessica, she wanted Kyle out of the picture. She didn't want to deal with him anymore. She said she loved me and she wanted to start a life with me, but Kyle wouldn't leave. He wouldn't listen to her. She got angry. I didn't think she'd go that far. So you were there when it happened, Laura pressed. You were in the house when she shot him? Adam nodded, his face pale. I didn't think she'd do it. I tried to stop her, but she was too far gone. She kept saying Kyle deserved it. He deserved to die for what he did to her. I didn't know what to do. Laura's eyes narrowed. The truth was unfolding in front of her, but the story was still incomplete. Adam had been involved, yes, but how far did his involvement go? Had he encouraged Jessica to murder her husband, or was he simply an unwilling accomplice? And why had he chosen to stay silent all this time? Why didn't you call the police? Laura asked, her voice cold. Adam didn't answer right away. He seemed to wrestle with his own guilt before he finally muttered, I thought I could fix it. I thought I could make it go away. I didn't want anyone to know what really happened. Laura was no longer interested in his excuses. You're going to need to come with me, Adam, she said, her voice steady. We're going to get to the bottom of this. As Adam reluctantly stepped into the back of her car, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that this case was far from over. The deeper she dug, the more complicated it became. Jessica McCall had killed her husband, but the web of lies, betrayal, and complicity ran deeper than anyone could have imagined. The truth was beginning to surface, but there was still so much more to uncover. And Laura knew that in the end, the entire town of Green River would be forever changed by what she was about to discover. The town of Green River had always been a quiet place. People knew each other by name, and the rhythm of life here moved slowly, as steady as the creek that ran through the town's edge. But now the air seemed different, thick with tension, buzzing with the whispered secrets of a family torn apart. The McCalls, once a symbol of stability in the community, had been shattered by betrayal, murder, and lies. Detective Laura Collins stood in the small, cluttered office of the sheriff's department, her eyes scanning the case files laid out before her. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, but there was something gnawing at her, a feeling that they were still missing something crucial, something that could reveal the true depth of the conspiracy. Adam Collins, the man at the heart of this tragic affair, had been taken into custody, and his confession, while damning, didn't tell the full story. He had admitted to being in the house when Kyle McCall was shot, and he had revealed that Jessica had been consumed by rage, feeling justified in her actions. But Adam's role in the murder was murky at best. Had he really tried to stop Jessica, or had he been complicit? Was he merely a passive observer, or had he subtly encouraged her? Laura's phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. She picked it up quickly, recognizing the number as one of her team members. Detective Collins, she answered. It's Sam, came the voice of Detective Sam Harris. We've got something. You need to come down to the station. Laura felt a spike of anticipation. What is it? Just get here. It's important, Sam replied before hanging up. The urgency in his tone left no room for delay. Laura grabbed her coat and headed out the door, her mind already racing with possibilities. What new revelation awaited her? When Laura arrived at the sheriff's station, she found Sam in the evidence room, holding a manila folder in his hands. His expression was grim, a stark contrast to his usual laid-back demeanor. Talk to me, Laura said as she walked into the room. Sam opened the folder and handed it to her. Inside was a series of photos, grainy, blurry, but unmistakable. The first photo was of a man and a woman standing together at what appeared to be a local bar. The woman was unmistakably Jessica McCall, and the man standing beside her was Adam Collins. The second photo showed them in an even more intimate moment. Jessica and Adam sitting close together at a table, their hands touching. The body language was clear. They weren't just co-workers or friends. They were lovers. Laura's stomach twisted as she scanned the images. So this confirms what Emily said. But this isn't new information. What's the catch? Sam stepped closer, pulling another piece of evidence from the folder. It was a bank statement, a withdrawal made from Jessica McCall's account. The transaction was recent, occurring just days before the murder. A withdrawal of $5,000. Laura's brow furrowed as she glanced at Sam. Where did she withdraw it from? A local ATM, Sam replied. But here's the kicker. There's a receipt for a second transaction, a deposit into a separate account in the name of someone we've never heard of, a man named Robert Davis. Laura blinked, the name sparking something in her memory. Robert Davis. Who is he? That's what we need to find out, Sam said, tapping the receipt with his finger. But here's what doesn't add up. Jessica has been using her personal account for everything. There's no reason for a secret deposit into another account, especially with the amount of money involved, and there's no record of Robert Davis being connected to her. Laura's mind began to race. This wasn't just an affair. There was more going on here, something hidden behind the affair and behind the murder. Jessica McCall had been hiding something, and it involved money. Was it blackmail? Was it part of a larger plan, one that included more people than just Jessica and Adam? Let's find out who Robert Davis is, Laura said, determination in her voice. We're missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. The next few hours were a blur of calls, research, and legwork. Laura and Sam dug into Robert Davis. They tracked down the account he held in Jessica's name and found that it was registered to an address on the other side of Green River. The man had been living there for several months under a fake name, with no record of any known criminal activity. But something about his sudden appearance in Jessica's financial history made the hairs on the back of Laura's neck stand up. They found an address and made their way to a small, rundown house, tucked away in an area of town that was less frequently visited. The house was quiet when they arrived, but they knew someone had to be inside. Laura knocked firmly on the door. A few moments later, it creaked open, revealing a man in his mid-40s, his features weathered and weary. He looked at Laura with cautious eyes, but when she flashed her badge, his demeanor shifted. He stepped aside, letting her and Sam enter. What do you want? Robert Davis's voice was gravelly, as if he hadn't spoken to anyone in days. We're investigating the death of Kyle McCall, Laura said, studying him closely. We need to know about your connection to Jessica McCall. Robert's face tightened at the mention of Jessica's name, and his eyes darted to the window behind him, as though considering whether he should flee. But he didn't run. Instead, he slumped into a chair and let out a heavy sigh. Jessica, he muttered almost to himself. I knew this day would come. What do you mean? Sam asked, his voice hardening. What's your connection to her? Robert looked up, meeting their eyes for the first time. She asked for my help, he said, his voice low. But I didn't know it would end like this. I just didn't know. Laura leaned forward, her mind already racing with possibilities. What did she ask you to do? Robert's eyes were distant, as if he were recalling a painful memory. She was in trouble, all right? Kyle wasn't just her husband. He was controlling. She couldn't leave him. She wanted to be with Adam, but Kyle wouldn't let go. She said she needed money to start a new life, to disappear with Adam. Go on, Laura urged. She came to me because she knew I could help her get the money, Robert continued. She told me she wanted Kyle dead, that it was the only way she could escape him. At first, I thought she was just venting, but then she made the deposit. I don't know what happened between her and Adam, but I know what she wanted. Wait, Sam interrupted. You mean she asked you to help her plan Kyle's murder? Robert nodded grimly. She didn't come right out and say it, but I knew what she meant. The money she gave me, it was for a clean job. She wanted Kyle gone, and she was willing to do anything to make it happen. Laura's stomach churned. The pieces were falling into place, but the truth was even darker than she had imagined. Jessica McCall hadn't just acted out of rage or passion. She had planned this murder, and Robert Davis had been a part of it. The investigation had just taken a twisted turn. And the truth was far more insidious than anyone had anticipated. The McCall case was no longer just about a wife killing her husband in a fit of jealousy. It was about a carefully orchestrated plot involving money, manipulation, and a cold, calculated decision to end a life. And now with Robert Davis's confession, the investigation was about to enter its most dangerous phase yet. Jessica McCall wasn't just a grieving wife or a victim. She was a murderer. And it was only a matter of time before the rest of the town learned the horrifying truth. The case had taken a dark and unexpected turn. Detective Laura Collins sat in her office, staring at the files before her, each one filled with new details that made her stomach churn. She had been a detective for over a decade, but there was something about this case, the betrayal, the calculated violence, and the web of lies, that left her feeling unsettled. Jessica McCall hadn't just murdered her husband in a moment of blind rage. No, it was far more sinister than that. It was cold, calculated, and planned. The affair with Adam Collins had been the catalyst, but the conspiracy to murder Kyle McCall had been set in motion long before that. Robert Davis had confirmed that. The money Jessica had withdrawn, the hidden accounts, the connections she had made to cover her tracks, it all painted a picture of a woman who had been planning her husband's murder long before the night she pulled the trigger. Laura leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples as the weight of the investigation pressed down on her. She had always prided herself on her ability to see through lies, to get to the truth. But in this case, the truth was more complicated than she had imagined. The confession from Robert Davis had been a major breakthrough, but it raised even more questions. What had happened between Jessica and Adam that night? Why had Adam been there when Kyle was killed? Had he been involved in the planning, or was he a mere bystander who had failed to stop Jessica? Laura's phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from her partner, Detective Sam Harris. The text was brief, but it carried a sense of urgency. "We need to talk. Come to the McCall house." Laura's heart skipped a beat. Something had changed. She grabbed her coat and hurried out of the office, her mind racing. Whatever Sam had found, it was important. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, but they weren't fitting as neatly as she had hoped. The McCall house was eerily quiet when Laura arrived, the early evening sun casting long shadows across the front porch. The yellow tape was still up, marking it as a crime scene, but it felt almost like a ghost town. The place had been abandoned in the wake of Kyle McCall's death, left to decay with its memories of a family torn apart. Sam was waiting for her on the porch, his face grim as he stood by the front door. He didn't waste any time. "We've got more," he said, his voice low. "What is it?" Laura asked, trying to keep the rising anxiety out of her voice. "It's about Jessica. We found something. Something that doesn't fit with the story we've been told." Laura followed Sam inside, her mind whirling. The house was just as she remembered it, neat, orderly, but lifeless. It was a place that had once held the sounds of a family, a husband and wife, and their daughter. Now it felt like a shrine to a tragedy. Sam led her to the kitchen, where several officers were going through drawers and cabinets. He pointed to a small, unassuming envelope sitting on the counter. Laura's eyes narrowed. It was addressed to Kyle, written in Jessica's handwriting. "Open it," Laura said. Sam carefully tore open the envelope and pulled out a letter. It was brief, but its contents hit like a punch to the gut. "Kyle, I'm sorry it had to be this way, but you've left me with no choice. I love Adam, and I will do whatever it takes to be with him. Don't try to stop me. You've always been a burden to me, and now I'll be free. Forever." Laura's pulse quickened as she read the letter. This was it. This was the moment of truth. Jessica McCall had planned Kyle's death, but the letter raised new questions. Why had she written it? Was it meant to be a confession? Or was it a message for someone else? Someone who might not have known the full extent of her plans. Sam was watching her closely, waiting for her reaction. "We found this in the drawer, hidden beneath some of her other paperwork. It was clearly meant to be found." Laura nodded slowly. Jessica McCall was playing a dangerous game. She wanted Kyle dead, and she wanted him to know it was coming. "But what does this mean?" Sam asked. "Why would she leave something like this behind? And why wasn't it mentioned in the initial investigation?" "I don't know." Laura muttered, turning the letter over in her hands. But it doesn't make sense. If she was planning his murder, why didn't she just leave with Adam when she had the chance? Why wait until the last minute? The questions were piling up, but the answers remained elusive. Laura had always believed that the truth would reveal itself eventually, but now it felt like the more she uncovered, the less she understood. The next day, Laura and Sam sat in the interrogation room at the sheriff's department, where Jessica McCall was being held. She had been quiet since her arrest, her demeanor cold and distant, as if she had resigned herself to the inevitable. But Laura knew there was more to her than what met the eye. There always was. Jessica was brought in, her hands cuffed, her face pale and drawn. She sat down across from them, her eyes steely but unreadable. "Mrs. McCall," Laura began, her voice steady but firm, "we've been through the evidence. We've spoken to Robert Davis. We've seen the letter you left behind for your husband, and we know that you planned Kyle's death." Jessica's eyes flashed with anger, but she didn't speak. She simply stared at Laura, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You've been lying to us from the start," Laura continued. "You've lied about your affair with Adam, about your relationship with Kyle. But the truth is clear now. You wanted him dead." Jessica's gaze never wavered, but Laura could see the tiniest tremor in her hands. The walls were closing in on her, but she was still holding on to something, a piece of the puzzle that Laura had yet to uncover. "What was your plan, Jessica?" Laura asked, leaning forward. "What made you think that killing Kyle would make everything better?" Jessica's voice was quiet, but there was a bitter edge to it. "You don't understand," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "Kyle was never the man I thought he was. He was controlling, manipulative. He drove me to this. He pushed me until I had no choice. And Adam, he's the only person who ever made me feel alive. I just wanted to be free." "But you didn't just want freedom, Jessica," Laura said, her voice sharp. "You wanted revenge, and you knew exactly how to get it." Jessica's lips trembled, but she didn't speak. For a moment, the room was silent, the weight of her confession hanging in the air like smoke. Laura stood up, her heart pounding. She wasn't done yet. There were still too many unanswered questions. What had Jessica hoped to achieve by killing Kyle? And why had she gone to such lengths to cover her tracks? As Laura walked out of the interrogation room, she knew one thing for certain. The truth was still slipping through her fingers. But she wasn't going to stop until she had all the answers. The case was unraveling, but it was clear that Jessica McCall had buried her secrets deep, and Laura was determined to find them, no matter what it took. The air outside was heavy with the kind of humid heat that only a Texas summer could bring. Laura Collins stood in the parking lot of the sheriff's department, staring out at the long stretch of road that led into the heart of Green River. The town, once so familiar, now felt distant, as if the truth of the McCall case had somehow fractured the very fabric of this peaceful community. It had been weeks since Kyle McCall's murder, and though the investigation had unearthed many secrets, the deeper Laura dug, the more complicated the situation became. Jessica McCall had killed her husband. Of that much she was certain. But there was more. The investigation had been clouded with lies, manipulation, and betrayal. Secrets that ran deeper than the affair with Adam Collins, deeper than the money and the plans for murder. The town had seen Jessica as a grieving wife, a woman wronged by an abusive husband. But Laura knew now that Jessica's true nature was something far more dangerous. The confession in the interrogation room had been chilling, but it had still left Laura with too many unanswered questions. Why had Jessica gone to such lengths to deceive everyone? What was the real story behind Robert Davis and the money? What was Jessica's ultimate goal? As Laura stared at the heat waves rising from the pavement, she felt the weight of her exhaustion. The case was almost over, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something lurking just beyond her reach, something she still hadn't uncovered. The office was quiet when Laura returned, the usual hum of activity muted as her colleagues went about their work. Sam was at his desk sorting through papers, but when Laura entered, he looked up, his face weary but determined. "You've been quiet," he said, his voice low. "What are you thinking?" Laura dropped into the chair across from him, running a hand through her hair. "I think we're missing something. I think Jessica's been playing us the entire time. Her confession, The letter, she's guilty, no question. But there's more to her than just a woman scorned. Sam raised an eyebrow, sensing where she was going with this. You think there's a bigger picture? Laura nodded. It's not just about her and Adam. It's not even about her and Kyle. It's about what she was trying to cover up. Something bigger was at play. And I think we're on the brink of uncovering it. They sat in silence for a moment, each lost in thought. Finally, Laura broke the silence. I need to talk to Emily, she said. We've missed something. Emily knows more than she's telling us. Emily McCall had been cooperative during the investigation. She had been the one to find her father's body, and she had appeared distraught, devastated even. But as Laura had learned through the course of her investigation, nothing was ever as it seemed. The drive to the McCall residence was long, the sun setting on the horizon as the town slipped into twilight. As Laura pulled up to the house, she saw Emily sitting on the porch, her legs drawn up to her chest. She looked so much like her mother, the same sharp features, the same intense gaze. But there was something about Emily now, something that seemed different, a guardedness, a quiet awareness. Laura stepped out of her car and walked toward the porch where Emily was sitting. Hey, Emily, she greeted softly, though her tone was professional. Emily looked up slowly, her expression unreadable. Detective Collins, I didn't think I'd see you again. I know this has been hard on you, Laura said, sitting down beside her, but I need to ask you some more questions. About your mom, about everything. Emily's eyes flickered with a mixture of emotions, fear, sadness, and something darker, something that sent a chill down Laura's spine. The young girl had been through more than anyone her age should ever experience, but there was something in her eyes now, something that spoke of knowledge, of a burden far too heavy for someone so young. I've told you everything, Emily said quietly, her voice low, almost too calm. I don't think you have, Laura replied gently. Emily, I need you to be honest with me. It's the only way we're going to get to the truth. For a moment, Emily didn't respond. She just stared at the ground, her fingers nervously playing with the hem of her shirt. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, she spoke. I don't think my mom was trying to kill Dad when it happened, she said, her words shocking Laura into stillness. I think she was trying to get him to stop. Laura's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? Emily took a deep breath, her shoulders trembling as she spoke. It wasn't just about Adam. It wasn't just about Kyle being abusive. It was about something else, something that no one knows about. Something my mom didn't want anyone to find out. Laura's instincts told her she was about to hear something important. What was it, Emily? Emily turned to face her eyes brimming with unshed tears. My mom, she wasn't just having an affair with Adam, she whispered, her voice barely audible. She was having an affair with Robert Davis, too. Laura froze. This was the missing piece, the one that had eluded them all along. Robert Davis, she repeated, her voice thick with disbelief. Emily nodded slowly, her lips trembling as she spoke. I don't know how long it had been going on, but they were close, really close. He used to come over to the house when Dad was away. I saw them together once. It was wrong, but I think she loved him. I think she loved both of them. The weight of Emily's words hung heavy in the air. Jessica McCall had been living a double life, not just with Adam, but with Robert Davis as well. The affair with Adam had been part of her escape, but the affair with Robert had been something else entirely, something darker. Why did she want Kyle dead? Laura asked, struggling to make sense of it all. Because Kyle knew, Emily whispered, her voice breaking. He found out about her and Robert. He was going to expose everything. And my mom, she couldn't let that happen. She didn't want anyone to know the truth. She wanted to protect her secrets. The pieces of the puzzle were finally falling into place. Jessica had not just killed Kyle because of an abusive marriage or a love affair. She had killed him to protect herself and the secrets she had been hiding for so long. She had been willing to destroy everything, her marriage, her family, her reputation, just to keep her affair with Robert Davis a secret. Laura stood up slowly, her mind racing. Thank you, Emily. You've helped me more than you know. Emily nodded, her face pale and worn from the weight of everything she had been forced to carry. "I just want it all to be over," she said quietly. "I just want to go home." Back at the sheriff's department, Laura sat at her desk, piecing everything together. Jessica McCall had planned Kyle's murder not out of a single moment of rage, but as part of a larger, more complex scheme. She had been involved with not one, but two men, Adam and Robert. The affair with Adam had been about love and escape. The affair with Robert had been about control and secrets. And when Kyle discovered the truth, Jessica had decided to eliminate him to protect everything she had built. The confession from Emily had been the key to unraveling the entire case. Jessica had lied, manipulated, and murdered to keep her web of deceit intact. The woman who had appeared to be a victim of circumstance was, in fact, the architect of her own tragedy. The case was finally closed, but as Laura looked out the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon, she couldn't shake the feeling that there were still more secrets buried in the town of Green River, secrets that might never come to light. The McCall case was over, but its shadow would linger for a long time to come.